Welcome to the purpose of this book with David G and David G. We are going to wrap up the chapter to wives tonight. I have high confidence. I want to say thank you to Kathy for sitting in for me last week. It was awesome to listen to her with David. And David and Kathy left off towards the bottom of 119. David, did you want to recap or summarize?
No, I think we could just move on. I'm good with that if you are.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
for
So we're
sure.
going to pick up bottom of 119, last paragraph. It is probably true that you and your husband have been living too much alone, for drinking many times isolates the wife of an alcoholic. Therefore, you probably need fresh interests and a great cause to live for as much as your husband. If you cooperate rather than complain, you will find that his excess enthusiasm will tone down. Both of you will awaken to a new sense of responsibility for others. You, as well as your husband, ought to think of what you can put into life instead of how much you can take out. Inevitably, your lives will be fuller for doing so. You will lose the old life to find one much better.
Anything heavy? Okay. So I don't have a lot to add to this paragraph, but one thing stands out to me. It's the bottom of the page of 119 in the second paragraph. And I'm going to relate it to something that's in the 12 and 12. It's on page 110 in the 12 and 12. So they'll be in step 12. And the last sentence on there says, both of you will awaken. This is in the big book. I'm sorry. Both of you will awaken to a new sense of responsibility for others. So let's pause right there. And let's go to the 12 and 12 on page 110. And we'll, in the very first paragraph, skip the first sentence. So the word I'm emphasizing here to get a better definition to me understanding just to throw a word in a paragraph. Bill is purposeful. Lots of meaning for why he writes the way he writes. So back to the 12 and 12, page 110, first full paragraph, second sentence. The word awaken. To watch the eyes of men and women open with wonder as they move from darkness into light, to see their lives quickly filled with new purpose and meaning, to see whole families reassembled, to see the alcoholic outcast received back into his community in full citizenship, and above all, to watch these people awaken to the presence of a loving God in their lives. These things are the substance of what we receive as we carry AA's message to the next alcoholic. So Mark Houston uses that example that we have been asleep, dreaming we've been awake. That for me was a really good definition of what awakening looks like in my life. So to continue at the top of page 120 and to keep with the theme of the principles of success is the first to finish that sentence off at the top of the page is sense of responsibility for others. So what are we talking about there? We're talking about the sense of responsibility for others. Let's go to the big book and let's bounce around a little bit and go to page 20, uh, top paragraph. In there is a solution related to the sense of responsibility for others. Top first full sentence on that page of 20. Our very lives as ex-problem drinkers depend upon our constant thought of others and how we may help meet their needs. That is my job. That is my responsibility. That is the principle of success that I need to have, and that is connecting some dots in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Back to the book on page 120. You, as well as your husband, ought to think of what you can put into life instead of how much you can take out of it. So I got to stop being a taker. I got to start being a giver, give away everything that I've been given, the gifts of sobriety, loving, tolerance, patience. And then the next sentence is, inevitably, your lives will be fuller for doing so. So when I get out of myself, when I get out of self, because we find out on pages 62, 63, 64, how self is just ruining my life and it's going to kill me. And I don't have the power to remove that thing. It's talking about having a fuller life when I get out of self. Fired myself from my management position. I am no longer in the primary position. I am in the secondary position. God is in the primary position today. And then it says on the last sentence, or you will lose old life to find one much better. I hope that's your experience. That is certainly my experience. even at my first couple years of sobriety, 5 years sobriety, 10, 15, 20, 25, whatever it was, my life continues to get better as long as I stay and practice the disciplines of step 10, 11, and 12. That's all I got, David.
Mm. Yeah, I think you did a nice job of detailing that paragraph. I guess I just wanted to add one thing. I was as we were reading this line, if you cooperate rather than complain, you will find that his excess enthusiasm will tone down. So I can kind of read that a couple of ways. And I was trying to think if there was anything else in this chapter that had that same sentiment. I mean, there's certainly been plenty of times as we've read in this chapter where Bill is giving a lot of heavy handed recommendations and directions to our spouses saying, oh, give them a break here, jump on the path there. There's a lot of that going on. And so this is a little more of that saying, if you cooperate rather than complain, you'll find that his excess enthusiasm will tone down. But then I was thinking, what does that mean that his excess enthusiasm will tone down? And how I'm reading it, and this is only an opinion, guys, as I interpret the book, because I'm not sure I really picked up on this line before. I wonder if what he's suggesting here is if our spouses hop into the saddle with us, the spiritual saddle, and we've got something to be excited about, as it suggests at the beginning of the paragraph, that what we're going to see and experience is because we're on the same path, we're going to see our spouses are going to see as we start to mellow as well. Because what my experience was, not only personally, but people I've seen around me, and I still see this today. A lot of times we come into recovery and there's a lot of energy, there's a lot of enthusiasm, right? We're going crazy, bouncing off the walls. Some of that's the nervous energy at the beginning because we haven't got our spiritual solution yet. But then some of that is that passion we develop. But like most things, I think the goal for someone like me, an alcoholic, a drug addict, is neither to be too high nor too low about anything. That I really need to be sort of a moderate and balanced guy. And as I read this sentence, the excess enthusiasm will tone down. Maybe this is a statement about both the alcoholic and the spouse who've been affected and volatile see themselves getting sort of to the baseline and staying close to it. Top of 120. Perhaps your husband will make a fair start on the new basis. But just as things are going beautifully, he dismays you by coming home drunk. If you are satisfied he really wants to get over drinking, you need not be alarmed. Though it is infinitely better that he have no relapse at all. Man, if you don't have that highlighted, please highlight that and read it to the people you're taking through the steps or you're meeting at meetings. Though it is infinitely better that he have no relapse at all, as has been true with many of our men, it is by no means a bad thing in some cases. Your husband will see at once that he must redouble his spiritual activities if he expects to survive. You need not remind him of his spiritual deficiency. He will know of it. Cheer him up and ask him how you can be still more helpful.
I just have dismay, which is uh, another word for disappointment.
Hmm.
So, first sentence there, perhaps your husband will make a fair start on the new basis. So, the new basis is the spiritual disciplines that the 12 steps offer us. And but just as things are going beautifully, he dismays you by coming home drunk. So, what does that look like? Well, the reason why he came home drunk is described in a really good way, in an efficient way, on page 101, where we're talking about in the first full paragraph in the chapter working with others. The prior paragraph, to set up paragraph that I want to talk about, is talking about how we can't hide from alcohol, right? So, I mean, you guys probably would agree. If you've been sober for more than 6 minutes, they've come out with a new tequila, a new vodka, some fruity alcoholic beverage, right? I mean, I don't even know what none of this stuff is, and sometimes it looks like a can of pop, right? I don't know, but so they're talking about how we can't avoid these things. They're just going to arrive in ourselves. Drugs is a little bit of another story. Overeaters Anonymous, I really can't avoid food, just like alcohol. I'm going to have it in my life. Gamblers Anonymous, you're going to see it advertised everywhere today. So I can't hide from it. But page 101, in the first paragraph, it says, we meet these conditions every day, to reemphasize what I just spoke about. And then it says, the reason why he got drunk again is for a couple reasons. I'm going to go to another page too, is he still has an alcoholic mind. So the obsession hasn't been removed. The unmanageability to spiritual malady still lives alive and well in his life, because he's probably not practicing all the steps. How many people is he working with? That's my question. And then when someone else goes out, I don't care how long you got, if you got 3 months, 3 years, 30 years. My first question to you is, can I help you with your sponsees until you get well? And the consensus is, when I've done that, they usually say, well, I'm not really working with anybody right now. And that's a big red flag for a guy like me. I need to be working with other alcoholics. We have a whole chapter called Working with Others, for instance. And I need to be working with other people today. Back to the text on page 101, he still has an alcoholic mind. There is something the matter with his spiritual status. So the matter, excuse me, the matter with my spiritual status is that I'm still trying to run my life on my own free will. Was I willing to go to any lengths? Any lengths, whatever that means. I don't know what that looks like. That doesn't mean that I have a sponsor that says you show up every meeting with pajama bottoms on. That's not going to any lengths. And I've heard people tell people to show up like that. That's any lengths, and it's not. It's ridiculous. What's any lengths for me is to get on my knees. That's my first line of defense, and ask God to remove this from me right now, right this minute, and then take the next appropriate action. Call somebody on the phone. Do an inventory. Whatever I got to do today. If it's in the middle of the night, prayer is my only defense, most likely, right? Not to pick up that drink. And then back to what we're reading here on page 120 in the first paragraph, right after he came home drunk. If you're satisfied he really wants to get over drinking, you need not be alarmed. I don't know how you determine that, because I'm a liar. I will tell you after my relapse that I'm remorseful, that your frothy emotional appeal is wonderful, but the bottom line here is like, I'm sorry that I did it, and I mean it. No, what I'm really sorry about is I'm sorry I got caught. That's what I'm sorry about, and that's my truth, because if I still have that alcoholic mind, I wish I could drink like normal people could drink, right? I do, because I can't differentiate the truth from the false. And then back to the text, it says, though it is infinitely better that he have no relapse. And I love that David emphasized that so strongly, because relapse is not a part of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. It doesn't happen. Absolutely. I came in 92. I got sober in 99. But I didn't relapse. I just continued. I never got recovered. Ever, ever, ever. I never did an honest 4-step. I never sat down and did a 5th step with anybody. I never cracked open the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I was sporadic in the meetings that I was going to. I was doing things for external purposes, not the internal purpose. That's my problem, is everything is internal and the solution is internal. I did not know any of that stuff. And then back to the text, it says, where's that? Though infinitely better they have no relapse at all, as has been true with many of our men, it is by no means a bad thing in some cases. In some cases, meaning that some people die and get locked up. I have one of my sponsees never had a solemn vow to herself that she would never, ever drink and drive, ever. And she didn't for 30 some years of her alcoholism. 30 years. The first time she did it, she got in a car accident and killed somebody. First time. And went to prison for I don't know how many years. I can't remember how many years she had to go to prison for. Imagine that on your conscience. Because the drive to pick up a drink, the obsession without my permission, without my consent, steals from me all my morals, and I do what I need to do because I broke out in craving. I'm off to the races again. Then it says, your husband will see at once he must. So there's one of those musts in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, about 142. Howard and Kathy have counted them up. I'm going to go with their number, because anything that relates to the word must, have tos, or had tos, that is a direction. And there's double his spiritual activities. If he expects to survive, that is a death threat. We die. We get locked up, or we get covered up, or we get sobered up. That is my 3 options. Period, to the end for me. You need not remind him of his spiritual deficiency. That is a direction for her and me. I'm not aware of it, but I should have a sponsor that's going to point that out to me. That's the reason why I drank. My spiritual deficiency, because I didn't rely upon God. Human beings are going to fail me, but God will never fail me. And I have to enlarge my spiritual experience with a power greater than myself today. And then it says he will know of it. Cheer him up and ask him how you can still be more helpful. Cheer him up. Bill, please. That's just silly. I mean, that's asking so much because we're in the way into the book here in the chapter 2 wives where somebody probably had a couple 24 hours possibly. And then I'm supposed to just like sit sit Indian style and just think to myself, this is okay. This too will pass. No, this maybe will never pass. He may never ever get sober again. So cheering him up is kind of a silly statement, I think. But what I can do is if my wife was an alcoholic, I could still be helpful. I could not judge. Why? Because I know the nature of this disease. Why? Because I understand the first step. That's why when I work with someone that goes back out again, I don't give up on them because I understand the powerlessness and the unmanageability, which is the real problem to my threefold disease. So I would never give up on that person. It's just not my job to do that. That's all I got.
So David made a point of saying, if you're satisfied, he really wants to get over drinking, but how are we supposed to know that? You know, the other side of that coin, and actually I know David does this with every new person and asks him things through the steps, is he says, are you done drinking for good and for all? You know, now a lot of times people may say yes, and they may believe it, but it turns out they're lying, right? We are such wonderful liars, and sometimes we don't even know, and that's okay. And yeah, I did make a point of emphasizing, though it's infinitely better that he have no relapse at all. And I'm emphasizing it for, David stole the thunder there. Relapse doesn't have to be a part of recovery. It really doesn't. And everybody's story is different. And every time I give a lead or like a Zoom lead and I share, that have been clean and sober since March 21st of 2004, I make a point of saying, I came to my first meeting and I've not drank or drugged since. I've never had a relapse. And that's not to brag. That's just my story. And the point that I make to newcomers is when you leave this meeting tonight, this study, wherever you are, the room of recovery that you're in, whether physical or virtual, you don't ever have to drink or drug or cut or spend or overeat or any of these things again. None of us have to, right? If we have the gift of desperation and then we do something about it. That's the tough part. I may be desperate, but am I going to parlay the desperation into action? And a lot of the slogans we have in the rooms do kind of drive me nuts. The ones that I don't know where they come from. Some come from treatment centers. Some just come from clever people, And one of them is you can't think your way into right action, but you can act your way into right thinking. And I really appreciate that statement. We were just at a meeting a couple of Sundays ago, and people were talking about feeling lonely and the holiday malaise and stuff like this. And I'm like, man, not me. I'm not lonely at the holidays. I'm not feeling any malaise. I am having a blast. This is the family time of year. It's all like I am loving it. Why? Is it because I'm more emotionally advanced or mentally superior as everybody else? No, it's because I am always in action in my program recovery, staying like thick as thieves with God so that I don't allow myself to backslide into some of these things. And guys, I'm not talking about people who have depression or stuff like that. And that's not what was being expressed in this meeting. It was like, oh, I'm just feeling kind of funky around the holidays. And I'm like, man, go help somebody in need. Go to that soup kitchen. Go serve a meal, right? Go sponsor a new person. When you're sitting there feeling lonely, did you call a newcomer or did you call your sponsor to complain about it? I know what you did. You either sat in the basement in the dark or you called your sponsor instead of trying to help somebody else, right? This action is what gets us better. This is the stuff that makes it so that I don't have to relapse. And by the way, Mrs. Jedi, she's out of town right now, who's been clean and sober for 18 years now, her story wasn't the same as mine. She started going to meetings and she had 2 or 3 relapses over her first year before she got it, before she got desperate enough and got into action. So again, I'm not moralizing. I'm just saying you don't have to relapse. Nobody has to relapse, but it's tough, right? The work we got to do is hard, especially at the beginning when we haven't gotten to God yet. So that's why it's infinitely better that he have no relapse at all, as has been true with many of our men, right? And it's by no means a bad thing in some cases. Yeah, does that relapse sometimes? Is it sometimes that final kick in the rear that some people need? Yeah, yeah. But again, David's story illustrated, and I've met many people like that too. They were banging around the rooms and never really worked that program recovery, and they went out one night and got behind the wheel of a car and killed someone. I've met a few people like that. It's crazy, crazy. One night, one drink, and it's only one drink, right? Because we all know what happens when we have one drink. Right? We have 100 more. And this last part, you need not remind him of spiritual deficiency. He will know of it. Maybe not. But this is more Bill doing what he's doing in this chapter, just sort of trying to position our spouses to give us all a break. Okay, and cheer him up and ask him how you can be still more helpful. And that's another tall ask from Bill, but that's okay. This is just how he decided to write this chapter. Moving on. The slightest sign of fear or intolerance may lessen your husband's chance of recovery. In a weak moment, he may take your dislike of his high-stepping friends as one of those insanely trivial excuses to drink. No, you don't have
So
high stepping, huh?
I do.
Oh, David does. Okay.
Yeah, I do, because Bill is being very strong in his vocabulary here. High stepping means seeking unrestrained pleasure, as by frequently nightclubs, parties, etc., leading to a wilder and faster life. So Bill's really being specific here on what he's talking about. And I was at a meeting on Monday night, and I like this guy very much that talked in the meeting. And he talks about going to the nightclubs. He talks about going to the bars. I just got done talking about page 101 and working with others, where we can't avoid alcohol. And I'm just using alcohol generically here. Whatever your drug of no choice is, just substitute it here. But in this case, can I avoid the nightclub? I have not gone to a nightclub for me to hang with my high stepping friends to get to experience some pleasure that I think I'm missing out in life, because I know the truth. We do not suddenly relapse. Suddenly does not happen. This is a premeditated drunk, period, the end. And that's what this is happening in a weak moment. What are these weak moments where I can't recall the pain of a day or a week or a month ago? Yeah, I might have that mental block, but I have a relationship with power today. I can rely on that power today. I don't put myself in a position to do these things today. I'm not going to do this high stepping that Bill's talking about with my old friends who don't really give two shits about me anyways. They really do not. I'm not going to put myself in that position. And then the last thing in this, after the high stepping friends, is one of these insanely and trivial excuses to drink. Insane. It is insane. What is the most insane thing I could ever do? What is the most insane thing I ever have done? I stole from my employer, right? That's insane. I didn't step out on my wife today, but I stepped out on my first wife a lot. I stole from people left and right. That's all seems insane. But what was the most insane thing I could do right now, right here today? Pick up the first one. That's the most insane thing I can do. Armed with the facts about myself, armed with the facts about Alcoholics Anonymous, me to pick up a drink would be absolutely insane. It's not a trivial excuse. I can't differentiate the truth from the false. I got to know the truth today. And based off the truth is, where there is truth, there is God. And again, I circle right back to, where's the power come from? Who's in the primary position? Is it me again? I need to be in the secondary position all the time, relying upon God. So I'm not going to put myself in that position. I'm not saying that you can't go out. David has his own business and he entertains and he takes all his employees out and they have a wonderful time. That's not what he's talking about. He's talking about me actually getting off the couch, leaving the house because I'm a little upset and I'm looking for some pleasure and hanging out with people that are maybe sometimes seedy, right? And put myself in a position where not suddenly, premeditated, drunk. I am going to pick up a drink. Maybe not that night, but eventually I will pick up a drink because I have no power, no choice, no control.
We never try to arrange a man's life so as to shield him from temptation. The slightest disposition on your part to guide his appointments or his affairs so he will not be tempted will be noticed. Make him feel absolutely free to come and go as he likes. This is important. If he gets drunk, don't blame yourself. God has either removed your husband's liquor problem or he has not. Highlight that one. If not, it had better be found out right away. Then you and your husband can get right down to fundamentals. If a repetition is to be prevented, place the problem along with everything else in God's hands. What do you got, Ab?
I have disposition, which is inclination or tendency.
Thank you. Let me hop in here, David.
Please.
So, yeah, so we're Bill's banging the drum on some concepts that have come up before in the book, never trying to arrange a man's life so as to shield him from temptation. Remember earlier in the book, it says we have to be over this, because if I'm just going to try to avoid alcohol, even if I move to the Greenland, an Eskimo's going to show up with a bottle, right? Which is the truth. If I'm just trying to hide, the booze will find me. It's everywhere in our society. I think everybody here is from the US, Canada, UK. We got our brothers from Thailand here, right? I know there's a whole lot of booze in all four of those countries, right? It's everywhere. So this can't be about avoidance and putting the blinders on. And this gets back into more direction. We're going to notice if they try to rearrange our lives. I'm not going to comment really on that. Make him feel absolutely free to come and go as he likes. This is a matter of Bill suggesting to our spouses to give us some trust. That's why he's saying this is important. But if he gets drunk, don't blame yourself. And at the bottom of the next page, there's going to be a little something about the Al-Anon family groups. But there's, one of those slogans in Al-Anon. I don't know if any of you here are Al-Anons or you go to, have you ever been to Al-Anon meetings? One of the important principles there is, hey, Al-Anon, you didn't cause this. You can't change it. You can't control it, right? And that's as much as it is for us as it is for the people around us. And Bill is double, triple, quadruple as many times here, getting back to the basics on the most important point. God has either removed your husband's liquor problem or he hasn't. If God has removed my liquor problem, if I'm enjoying those promises of the 10th step, my liquor problem's gone. It's just been removed. I don't have a problem. I don't drink. I don't not drink. Like, alcohol is just not part of the equation. So if not, though, if God has not removed my liquor problem, or a spouse is saying this about us, it had better be found out right away. Why? Because for the love of God, we got to make sure that we don't die, that the alcoholic doesn't die. We got to get to God. We got to have this spiritual experience. Then you and your husband can get right down to fundamentals. What are the fundamentals? About the steps, the program recovery, being in the unity part of our fellowship, and how about getting into service? I can't remember if we read it, and I always forget if it's in the chapter to the wives or if it's in the family afterwards, but it talks about in the early days of his convalescence, right? That, and I'm paraphrasing because I can't quote this line, but in the early days of convalescence, nothing helps an alcoholic more than working with other alcoholics, getting into service immediately. And I know that part of it I do have right in the early days of his convalescence. Now we go to meetings, guys, and you hear people say, oh, my sponsor told me I'm not allowed to start sponsoring anybody until I finish the steps, which I don't even know how you finish the steps, or until I've been sober a year, or I've heard people say until I've been sober 5 years. What? The best way for me to get straightened out and to stay on straight and narrow is to work intensively with people who need my help. Come on, guys. This is not about what I am taking, as Bill's also talking about on this page. It's like, what am I giving in life at large? Yeah, but also right here in recovery.
Yeah, there's a lot to this paragraph, and the principle of success in here is that Bill's talking about is never try to arrange a man's life. So the principle of success is I need not to excuse me, arrange my wife's life. So I'm just flipping the script on that. It's not my job to tell her what she needs to do. Like I never give my wife direction. And she likes to say, please don't sponsor me. That's what she always tells me. Like even with one of my daughters is like, right now is a good time for you to listen, not to sponsor your daughter. None of them are alcoholics, right? But nonetheless, I put on the sponsor hat. I am Mr. Fix It guy. That's not true. I need to be a better listener. But in the paragraph there, halfway through, it says, this is important. If you get drunk, don't blame yourself. Nobody can get me drunk. Nobody. Why? And why would I get drunk? Bottom of page 14, Bill's story. And it talks about here in the sixth paragraph, the last paragraph, my friend had emphasized the absolute necessity of demonstrating these principles in all my affairs. So practicing the 12 steps in all my affairs. Particularly, it was imperative to work with others as he had worked with me. Then faith without works was dead, he said. How appalling true for the alcoholic. For if an alcoholic failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life, I don't want to mess it up, spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice of others, he could not survive the certain trials and low spots ahead. If he did not work, he would surely drink again. And if he drank, he would surely die. Then faith would be dead indeed. With us, it is just like that. Guys, I can't tell the difference between a hangnail and a death in the family. I have to be balanced, spiritually balanced. Emotional sobriety looks like this in step 10. I have to have the 10-step discipline in my life. And then, and it says here, God either removed his husband's liquor problem or he has not. So let's go to page 45. And in the first paragraph, it talks about lack of power. That was a dilemma. We had to find a power by which we can live, and it had to be a power greater than ourselves. That is an action. That italic writing means action. Obviously, but where and how do we find this power? I got to read the next paragraph because Bill poses the question, then he immediately gives us the answer, and I love that. Well, that's exactly what this book's about. Its main object is enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem. That means we have a written book, which we believe is to be spiritual as well as moral, and it means, of course, that we are going to talk about God. Here, difficulty arises with the agnostics. Many times we talk to a new man. We make that approach. Watch his hope rise as he discusses his alcoholic problems and explain our fellowship. But his face falls when we speak of spiritual matters, especially when we mention God, for we have reopened a subject which our man thought he had neatly evaded or entirely ignored. The mind snaps shut in this situation here. But God is the only one, a power, not a human power, has to remove my obsession. I don't have mine happened when I was 3 months sober. I exactly remember what happened. I won't go into the whole story because of time. But he removed my obsession. I have not had the obsession without meaning that it overrides all my thinking. And an obsession is a thought, but an obsession takes up the whole screen. Like right now, if I had an obsession and I'm on a Zoom meeting, it would take up the whole screen. None of you people would exist. None, period. I would have to pick up no matter what. And then it says, if not, have better be found out right away. Then you and your husband may get right down into the fundamentals, which is steps 1, 2, and 3. That's fundamentals. If a repetition is to be prevented, place the problem along with everything else in God's hands. That's what I need to be doing here. And then on one last page I'm going to reference here is I think it's on 24 in the third paragraph. Oh, yeah, I may be wrong here. That might be for another note. Yeah, it is. I'm sorry. It's for another note. But anyway, so what is this paragraph saying? Do I desperately need God? Yeah, I desperately need God. Do I desperately need the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous? Yes, I do. And do I desperately need to have a big book sponsor? Do I desperately need meetings? Do I desperately need to do a service position? Yes, and all above. Yes. If I'm connected to that, I need not fear about, I can have permanent sobriety.
Papa 121. I might make a couple comments as I read this because I can't help myself with this paragraph.
Please do.
Well, this is sort of an interesting way to wrap up this chapter. We realize that we have been giving you much direction and advice. That is an understatement. We may have seemed to lecture. That's an even bigger understatement. If that is so, we are sorry, for we ourselves don't always care for people who lecture us. And that is the granddaddy of understatements, right? So it's just, again, having a little fun here with how Bill wrote some of this. But what we have related is based upon experience, some of it painful. We had to learn these things the hard way. That is why we are anxious that you understand and that you avoid these unnecessary difficulties. So, as we read this paragraph, we are rereading it, and because I've studied this enough, I'm only able to read it in Bill's voice, pretending that he is someone like Lois. I'm really sort of unable to read this as a wife or a spouse, and that's really what this voice is supposed to be. This is really supposed to be saying, spouse to spouse, we realize we've been giving you too much direction, advice, et cetera, et cetera. But I think Bill is losing a little bit of his transparency here, which is okay. And so the important point here is that I love the fourth line, but what we've related is based upon experience, some of it painful. Yes, think about the families that came before us and what they experienced as they got healthy. But this, of course, is also true of the early alcoholics. I love when Joe and Charlie talk about this, about all the experimenting Dr. Bob was doing, trying to dry people out and save their lives, right? Feeding them sauerkraut juice with honey and stuff in it and all these other things. And people died at their hands. Well, they were doing their best to save lives. So there were so many things. We're so fortunate today, guys. So fortunate that we have so much history behind us. We don't have to figure anything out. We have to figure nothing out. It's all been figured out for us. And we've never been alive on this planet at a time where there's more brilliant people, all the people that sponsored David and I over podcasts that came before us, the Parkers and the Ramers and the Houstons and the Hawks and the Joes and the Charlies, all these people who understood all this and explained it and made it so easy to understand, so that we were able to learn from them. And it goes on to say, that is why we're anxious that you understand and that you avoid these unnecessary difficulties. Listen, we want to save everybody's life. We want everyone to get healthy physically, mentally, and spiritually. The alcoholics, the addicts, the compulsives, yes, and everyone around us who loves us as well. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, I really don't have anything to add. You did a great job there at that. So let's end the chapter.
Yeah, I'll end the chapter and I'll also read the footnote that relates. Let me read the Al-Anon footnote real quick. Jeez, if I can read that. Holy cow. The Fellowship of Al-Anon Family Groups was formed about 13 years after this chapter was written. Though it is entirely separate from Alcoholics Anonymous, it uses the general principles of the AA program as a guide for husbands, wives, relatives, friends, and others close to alcoholics. The foregoing pages, though addressed only to wives, indicate the problems such people may face. Alateen, for teenage children of alcoholics, is a part of Al-Anon. If there is no Al-Anon listing in your local telephone book, you may obtain further information on Al-Anon, Alateen family groups by writing to its World Service office, and then there's an address there in Virginia. And then we conclude with, so to you out there who may soon be with us, we say good luck and God bless you. Whew, that's a long chapter.
Yeah.
All right, let us move on into the family afterward. And I did conclude while David was talking a second ago, that bit that I was looking for, actually, that I was referencing about the convalescence, is in the family afterward on page 129, and we won't get there tonight. So I just want to read this because I'd sort of not a great way paraphrased it, talking about us as the alcoholic. Even if he displays a certain amount of neglect and irresponsibility towards the family, it is well to let him go as far as he likes in helping other alcoholics. During those first days of convalescence, this will do more to ensure his sobriety than anything else. Think about that, guys. Okay, chapter 9, the family afterward. Page 122. Here we go. Our women folk have suggested certain attitudes a wife may take with the husband who is recovering. Perhaps they created the impression that he is to be wrapped in cotton wool and placed on a pedestal. That sounds nice. Successful readjustment means the opposite. All members of the family should meet upon the common ground of tolerance, understanding, and love. This involves a process of deflation. The alcoholic, his wife, his children, his in-laws, each one is likely to have fixed ideas about the family's attitude toward himself or herself. Each is interested in having his or her wishes respected. We find the more one member of the family demands that the others concede to him, the more resentful they become. This makes for discord and unhappiness.
I just have
And
oh, sorry.
go ahead, Abby,
I
please.
I just have discord, which is a conflict or disagreement.
Thank you, Abby. So here's the way I read. Again, we're going to put principles of success into this chapter here, so I know where to practice these principles on my affairs. This is a very tough place for, especially a new recovered alcoholic or a recovering alcoholic, to practice these principles. But when I read the family afterward referring to the sober alcoholic. After an alcoholic works the steps and clean up the past, or is in the present moment of cleaning up the past, and rejoining society, and spiritually alive and active, the obsession has been removed. That's what this looks like for me, anyways. Then it says, perhaps they've created an impression, second sentence in that first paragraph. Perhaps they've created an impression that he's being wrapped in cotton wool and placed on a pedestal. So the reference Bill's talking about there in cotton wool is it's the idiom meaning wrapped in cotton wool, means to protect in an overly cautious and protective manner. But here's the key. It's usually out of love and concern. The motives are correct, right? They are. They really are. Don't upset dad. I remember when my mother-in-law was going through menopause, and my father-in-law, when we would go over and visit or have dinner, and the whole family's over, and she's like, whatever you do, he gathered all the family around. Do not upset your mother today. Do not upset. And it's kind of like the same thing. The poor woman's hormones are raging, and she's and she couldn't help it. We're the alcoholic who has a spiritual principles in our life. I need to practice these things so that they don't have to feel like they need to wrap me in cotton wool. That is not it. Mom, yeah, let's do that. Let's do that for her. She can't control that. And but then it says the successful adjustment means the opposite. All members of the family should meet upon common ground of tolerance, understanding, and love. So that's a great principle of success that I should be practicing in my life with my family. And then it says the alcoholic, his wife, his children, and his in-laws, each one is likely to have fixed ideas about the family's attitude towards himself or herself. Each is interested in having his or her wishes respected. We find the more one member of the family demands the others concede him, or more resentful they become. This makes for discord and unhappiness, which is part of the spiritual malady. But what am I doing here that is going to upset the apple cart? On page 60 in the fourth paragraph, that's how I'm going to look at this and how it works. This is how I'm going to connect some dots here, being that my ego needs to be deflated. I need to find humility. That is part of the 12th tradition that I need to talk about here. But what I want to talk about is the fourth paragraph on page 60. The first requirement is that we be convinced that any life run as self-will can hardly be a success. On that basis, we're almost always in collision with something or somebody, even though our motives are good. Most people try to live by self-propulsion. Each person is like an actor who wants to run the whole show, is forever trying to arrange the lights, the ballet, the scenery, and the rest of the players in his own way. If it's arrangers who only stay put, if only people who do as, I'm going to change the word to I, wished, the show would be great. Everybody, including myself, would be pleased. Life would be wonderful. In trying to make these arrangements, David may sometimes be quite virtuous. I may be kind, considerate, patient, generous, even modest, and self sacrificing. On the other hand, I may be mean, egotistical, selfish, and dishonest. But as with most humans, David is more likely to have varied traits. I'm supposed to have some kind of spiritual balance here, some emotional balance, relying upon a power greater than myself today, not allowing the spiritual malady to be running my life. My life is not unmanageable any longer here today. So, top of that sentence says, any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. And this is where the ego takes over. The ego, as Harry Tiebout says, has an uncanny ability to regenerate itself. So I need to practice these principles of success that those were outlining these things there for the family. I need to enlist them in my life.
Thanks, David. So I've got to take the opportunity to point this out again, since I was already a little soapboxy about something else tonight. In this first sentence, our women folk have suggested certain attitudes a wife may take with the husband who is recovering. This is the only time in the book the word recovering is used. Right? So if you're a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, you may go to meetings and you hear people introduce themselves as a recovering alcoholic. And that makes sense to me if someone is still taking the steps for the first time. They're still recovering. They haven't recovered. However, the word recovered does appear 18 times in the book, including on the title page. The goal here is to be recovered, not to perpetually be recovering. You guys who study with us, I'm always drawing the parallels between alcoholism and addiction with diabetes. I am diabetic. My diabetes is under control. I'm recovered. I'm no longer recovering from high blood sugar. Is it gone? Am I cured? No. But is it actively killing me? No, it is not. It's at a good number, right? Same thing with my alcoholism. I get recovered. I got to God. He solved my problem. He solved all my problems, right? So it goes on to say then, successful readjustment. What is a readjustment? That's change, right? What are we doing here in our program recovery? We are changing. We're getting to God so we can change what's going on in our head, our heart, and our gut, right? So I cannot be protected. I can't be insulated, wrapped in cotton wool like David has talked about, and expect it to change. I need to go out there and do esteemable things. I need to go out there and get into action like I was talking about earlier. I got to quickly make sure I understand steps 1, 2, and 3, and then I've got to get into that inventory. And if you had any kind of experience like I did, writing that first, fourth step, doing it thoroughly and honestly, and completing that fourth column, I was changing. I was changing. Right? There was no doubt when I was able to complete the inventory that way. All members of the family should meet upon the common ground of tolerance, understanding, and love. That is a lot to ask for a household of spiritually sick people, but I get that that is the goal. And this involves a process of deflation. Deflation of what? What do we have to deflate? Ego, right? I've got to deflate the ego. The alcoholic, his wife, his children's in-laws, each one likely to have fixed ideas, et cetera, et cetera. What is this last part really talking about? Everyone in the family around us who's been suffering at our hands has expectations about how they would like us to grow and to go, and how they would like the family environment to be. What is the problem with expectations among spiritually sick people? They're all going to turn into resentments. Each one to a T. We're all terribly sick. And that's what I think Bill is reminding us of here. So we've all got to work together to get better. Next paragraph. And why? And why what? That last sentence, this makes for discord and happiness. And so then it blends in. And why? Is it not because each wants to play the lead? Is not each trying to arrange the family to show his liking? Is he not unconsciously trying to see what he can take from the family life rather than give? And that cadence, that language, the words that Bill's using, doesn't that sound exactly like what David took us back to? With the actor in the play, Bill's using the exact same approach there. Sorry, Ab, did you have anything in that paragraph? That short one? No. Okay. Let me just say a couple more notes about this. So Bill is using that same sort of language technique as he did back on page 60, and then he's just doubling down again on something that we were just studying at the end of the Two Wives chapter. Is he not unconsciously trying to see what he can take from the family life rather than to give? Are we seeing a trend here? This is not about me. This is not about self. This is about selflessness. This is about other centeredness. This is about all you guys, not me. It's a very difficult putt, too. None of this stuff is easy. Even 20 years in, I'm still a self centered guy. I'm recovered from it, but I'm sure not cured from my self centeredness. That's for sure.
Yeah, this short little paragraph after a very, very long paragraph is really talking about how I am so selfish and self-centered. I brought up on page 60, their first requirement is that we be convinced that any life run on self-will could hardly be a success. When the bedevilments show up in my life, and they could, but I have a 10 step, I have an 11 step to avoid that, and I have a 12 steps, 10, 11, and 12 spiritual disciplines. So I don't have to live in the bedevilments on page 52. But when they show up, a great page for me, and this has happened to me when I'm full of self-pity, when I'm full of self-pity at the end, I go to page 62, 64. That shows me what my real problem is. My troubles are my own making. Selfishness, self-centeredness are my problems today. These are the things that I look to in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous to find out that I am without power when it comes to this. I don't have the power to remove this on my own. And it says in the last sentence there is if is he not unconsciously trying to see what he can take from the family life rather than give? I gotta knock the AA opera shit off. I swore twice today. I apologize, guys. The me. It's all about me. Stop. It's about giving. It's about being of service. It's about being a good husband. It's about being a good father. It's about all the things. And I promise you this is not something that I can pull off of my own power. God has placed people in my life to be demonstrations and how to be a husband, how to be better with my finances, how to go to work every day and provide for my family the way I'm supposed to provide, how to be a father, how to be a grandfather. When you get sober and you wake up to 5 daughters one day, that was overwhelming to me to find out that I have some responsibility here and I don't have the solution any longer. We stopped working, by the way, a long time before that. But I would, because of the obsession that drove me back to the drink, and then I had the craving, I really wasn't present at all. But now that I'm out of sleep and dreaming I'm awake, the demonstrations of people that God placed in my life by going to the fellowship and meeting you wonderful people, you are wonderful demonstrations on how to do that. And I think by the grace of God and the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, I think I pulled that off. And I think I have a great relationship. One of my daughters is a nurse and she's calling me right now to just on her way home from work. And that's a regular thing that we do at night. We talk. My kids come over to my house. We invite them over for dinner and just hang out and bring the babies over and the grandson. First of all, credit goes to my wife for keeping that all together. Please do not give me credit for things that I did not pull off. But now that I'm a part of it, and because of the demonstration in my life today, I am not a taker. I'm trying to be a giver. That's all I got.
All right. One more paragraph, then we'll wrap up.
Okay.
Cessation of drinking is but the first step away from a highly strained, abnormal condition. A doctor said to us, years of living with an alcoholic is almost sure to make any wife or child neurotic. The entire family is, to some extent, ill. Let families realize as they start their journey that all will not be fair weather. Each in his turn may be footsore and may straggle. There will be alluring shortcuts and bypaths down which they may wander and lose their way.
I have a couple here. Cessation is to stop or quit. Neurotic is emotionally or mentally disturbed, and straggle is to stray or wander.
Thanks, Ab.
Do you want me to go?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. All right. So that cessation, the process of ending something or brought to an end. So my drinking is but the first step away from a highly strained and normal condition. A doctor says to us, years of living with alcoholism will sure make a wife, a child neurotic. So dysfunctional, very dysfunctional. Absolutely. I affect my family. I totally did in a lot of different ways. Reparation was the key to that. Demonstration, practicing these principles on my affairs also allowed my family to get well. And I didn't hold them in bondage of their selves and imprison them because of my disease. Then it says the entire family is to some extent ill. Let families realize as they start their journey. So for me, just to stop drinking, and I think it's on page 82. I don't know where it's at on page 82, but it says something about a man is unthinking when he says just not drinking is enough. It's not enough. It's so-called untreated alcoholism, and I'm worse when I'm not drinking. And then it says let families realize that they let families realize as they start their journey. So if they choose to go to Al-Anon or whatever they choose to do, that they get to have a spiritual experience too. That all will not be fair weather. Each in his turn, maybe foot sore may struggle. So remember, I don't know where it's at in the book exactly, but the guy comes out of the cellar and says, "Ain't it great the wind stopped blowing by?" that's not enough. There's action and more action.
All right, on that, let us wrap.